Hello there. If you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this video, first of all, thank you for being so brave. Secondly, I have a question for you, and that question goes something like this. If shunning is scriptural, if it is proper, if shunning is approved by God, why does Watchtower, through its representatives and indeed on its own website, either deny it or refuse to admit to it? Now, probably in response to that question, you might have one or two reactions, and I'm bracing myself for these reactions and I want to preempt them if at all possible. One reaction might be, don't be silly, Jehovah's Witnesses don't shun, which I do hear Jehovah's Witness apologists saying in comments on videos, etc. And the easiest way to rebut that argument is for me to show you two videos. The first one is a talk that was given at last year's 2013 district convention, which very clearly reminded Jehovah's Witnesses to shun any disfellowshipped family members as an act of loyalty. So you need to watch that video. And the second video you need to watch is my rebuttal of governing body member Tony Morris's talk in Rome, which, if memory serves, was done in January, only in January this year, in which he also reminded Jehovah's Witnesses to shun disfellowshipped family members. The second reaction that a Jehovah's Witness might take to the question I've posed is, don't be silly, we don't deny that we shun our relatives. Jehovah's Witnesses don't deny that they have a shunning policy. And obviously it's incumbent upon me to prove that that is indeed what they do. So Exhibit A, first piece of evidence, is Rick Fenton, who happens to be an old friend of mine. We used to go camping together, and we basically grew up in the same congregation, so we were good friends at one point. And he was interviewed in an independent article which was published on September 27th, 2011. And the article reads, Rick Fenton, a spokesperson for the Watchtower Society, insisted last night that ostracization was a personal matter for each individual to decide for himself. It's a personal matter. Watchtower doesn't tell family members, Watchtower doesn't tell Jehovah's Witnesses to shun disfellowshipped family members. Any of Jehovah's Witnesses is free to express their feelings and to ask questions, he said. If a person changes their mind about Bible-based teachings they once held dear, we recognise their right to leave. So Rick Fenton there basically saying that shunning is a personal decision. It's not something that Jehovah's Witnesses are told to do in the literature, and saying that everybody is free to leave. Jehovah's Witnesses are free to leave, which implies that they're not punished. They're not punished for leaving. And I would obviously have a lot to say about that, because I did leave purely because I no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm being punished through my family. Exhibit B, the second Watchtower representative to deny shunning, quite strongly in fact, is Vincent Toole. Quite a good name, that. Vincent Toole in The Age, and this was published March 15, 2013. And this is what the article said. Victoria's current state inquiry into how churches handle child sex abuse has submissions from former Jehovah's Witnesses. One includes allegations of rape, sexual assault, blackmail and death threats. Others include allegations of paedophilia. A spokesman for the church in Australia, Sydney solicitor Vincent Toole, dismissed the allegations and said shunning was a myth. So Vincent Toole, Watchtower representative, a lawyer, quoted in an Australian newspaper, magazine, whatever, saying that shunning is a myth. So second denial. Third exhibit C, is straight from the jw.org website on the FAQ page, and when the jw.org website was first launched, one of the first things I did was do an article on its shamefully misleading FAQ sections. And the one on shunning was probably one of the worst ones, because the question asked was, do Jehovah's Witnesses shun former members of their religion? And the first paragraph said, those who are baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses but no longer preach to others, perhaps even drifting away from association with fellow believers, are not shunned. In fact, we reach out to them and try to rekindle their spiritual interest. So immediately the question is answered in a misleading way with something that doesn't apply to the question. So the question was, are former Jehovah's Witnesses shunned? And the first paragraph starts talking about inactive witnesses, who by definition aren't former witnesses. They're just witnesses who don't go to meetings anymore. So it's not applicable to the question, basically. But they're giving that answer because they want to give the impression that they're reasonable and that they don't shun former members. And then it goes on to talk about how people are disfellowshipped for breaking the Bible's moral code and not repenting. Well, I disassociated myself without breaking the Bible's moral code purely because I no longer agreed with the religion, and I'm being shunned. So that's not mentioned at all. That scenario isn't mentioned at all in the FAQ, in this particular FAQ. And then the third paragraph talks about how a head of a household isn't to be shunned by his children. That's one of the few loopholes that are available. And the fourth paragraph says, well, disfellowship people can still attend meetings, which again isn't what the question asked. So the question is not given a straight answer. In fact, the answer is extremely evasive and misleading and refuses to admit that former Jehovah's Witnesses are shunned. Exhibit D, our fourth example, or fourth and final example, is Viikko Linonen from Finland. Apologies about the pronunciation. And this is a recent video that's just been uploaded, and I'd like to thank the people who were responsible for uploading it, our friends in Finland. And I want to play you this clip where a Watchtower representative is asked a straight question about whether a witness child who turns into a youngster, bear in mind that Jehovah's Witnesses can be baptized as children, so a witness child who turns into a youngster, whether they are free to leave the religion if they choose. And listen to what his response was.
Mitä sitten kun lapsi kasvaa nuoreksi ja hiukan aikuistuu, niin voiko hän itse valita, haluaako olla Jehovan todistajissa mukana vai ei?
Kyllä, ja se valintahan on nimenomaan itse tehtävä. Ei sitä kukaan muu voi hänen puolestaan tehdä.
Voiko hän vapaaehtoisesti sitten vain jättäytyä pois ja alkaa elämään omaa elämää?
Totta kai. Aivan vapaaehtoisesti. Ja me toivomme, että hän vapaaehtoisesti tulisi sitten takaisinkin. Ei tule minkäänlaista muuria.
Ei aleta siis karttaa tällaista pois lähtiä.
Ei.
So here is where someone might argue, well, he was probably talking about unbaptized children who decide to leave, who wouldn't be shunned because they're not baptized. Yes, he might well have been talking about that, but he should have, if he was giving an honest, sincere response to the question as posed, he should have explained precisely what the ramifications would be for baptized versus unbaptized. And if he was saying that an unbaptized child who decides not to be a witness is absolutely not shunned, then he should have followed up that response by saying, but if a Jehovah's Witness child is baptized, then yes, we would shun them. He was being evasive. He was asked a straightforward question by an interviewer who probably didn't know how to probe on the issue, didn't know enough about the issue to probe on that question. and took the easy road. He took the easy road by giving a very misleading answer without explaining what the ramifications are for baptized youngsters versus unbaptized youngsters. So 4 examples there of either Watchtower representatives or Watchtower itself on its own website being presented with an opportunity to clarify whether former Jehovah's Witnesses are shunned, and either, in the case of Vincent Toole and arguably Rick Fenton, denying outright that shunning exists, saying that shunning is a myth, saying that Jehovah's Witnesses are free to leave, or, in the case of the latter 2 examples, refusing to admit to the shunning policies of Jehovah's Witnesses, refusing to admit to them. Which brings me back to the question I posed at the start of the video. If shunning is scriptural, if it is morally correct, if it is advisable, if it is God approved, God ordained, if it is a commandment of Jehovah, why be ashamed of it? Remember that in the Bible there's countless examples of prophets like Jeremiah who would rather go through torture, who were happy to face torture as a ramification of delivering unpopular pronouncements from God. They were happy to be tortured as a result of saying stuff that wasn't popular. And in the case of Watchtower's representatives, they evade, they mislead, they lie, rather than admit to something that is supposed to be a commandment of Jehovah. So I think that is a really important question for Jehovah's Witnesses watching this video to ask themselves. And thank you for watching.